So I'm sure this will sound familiar to a lot of you guys. You're supposed to be writing music, but instead you've been soloing a kick drum for about 30 minutes, or you are trying to dial in a snare sound because it sounds terrible, and you are getting distracted from what you're supposed to be doing. So that was me 2 years ago. I was constantly ruining my creativity by getting obsessed with production details. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up an amazing pro sounding writing template to keep your creativity on the right track. So more people than ever are getting into music production and mixing and that kind of stuff. And particularly if you're in a band, it always helps to have one person that's really good with a DAW to demo ideas before going into a proper studio, that kind of stuff. If you're a musician writing music at home, the biggest trap isn't bad gear, it's getting distracted. You spend hours chasing the perfect tones, but when it comes to recording a riff, you've forgotten it, or the creativity's gone, or it's just time to go to bed. Being a musician that then gets into music production and mixing is kind of a double-edged sword. It can be really amazing and useful to have all of this knowledge, but it can actually distract you from why you originally got into this, which is just making music in the first place. So when you sit down to write some music, but then you get distracted by all these technical details, your brain switches from artist to engineer. And engineers chase perfection, artists chase ideas and creativity. So I'm going to show you how to set up a really simple writing template that's going to sound really professional. It's going to be the best way to get your ideas down quickly. We're going to use as few plugins as possible, and it's going to be good for your CPU. I already have a writing template, but I'm going to show you how I set it up from scratch. I use Cubase, but you can do this in any DAW. So first up, drums. Going to add a pre-mixed drum sample library. So I created this plugin because I am obsessed with metal production, and I couldn't find any pre-mixed drum libraries out there that actually replicated the sounds of all the records that I love. Stuff that just sounds pre-mixed out of the box. You can route this through your DAW, you can tweak it if you want, but the whole point is that it sounds like a finished record straight away. I feel like not many of the companies that create these types of things live and breathe this type of music as much, and maybe what they think we want is just an approximation, but as someone that obsesses over metal production and listens to it all day, every day, I feel like this actually gets a lot closer to what we want as metalheads, and I want it to sound like all the records I love. So a lot of attention to detail has gone in on this. So instantly, just the default kit sounds amazing. That's the drums. Up next, we're going to add some guitar tracks for rhythm guitars. I only stick to using a DI, mainly because it means if you come and revisit a song later and you may have changed your Kemper Quad Cortex tone, it just means you've got a DI to work with and your tone's going to be consistent. And for the sake of demoing, I only ever double track, because the song is never finished until we leave the studio and hand the record into the label. So at any point, I want to be able to easily go back and change a riff, and it's a lot easier when you're just working with two guitars. Okay, so I've loaded up an amp sim. You could load up any amp sim you want, but the whole point is to try and get mix-ready tones and not have to do any mixing. So there are some presets available in this one, but just for the sake of ease, I'm going to use some of the pre-mixed impulse responses with this. So I've loaded up the impulse response pack folder, mix EQ impulse responses. I really like this one. I've labeled Killer just because it sounds really good. That's kind of like my go-to 5150 settings. That's probably good. Then I'm just going to copy this. In fact, I could have just duplicated that if I wanted to, so just duplicate that track. And you can label them, guitar left, guitar right, and then I'm going to add a guitar group, and it's going to be stereo because left and right guitars. I'm going to send each guitar to a guitar group. Now typically I would have my EQ and processing on this group, but the whole point is not to do that. But I'm still going to use a group just because it's easier just to turn the volume up and down on the group as opposed to two separate tracks. And then next we're going to load up a bass. I quite like using Eurobass 3 at the moment. In a lot of these submission audio bass libraries, there's a DI sound, a clean amp sound, or a distorted tone. Again, for the sake of not doing any mixing, go for either the clean or distorted. Now there's a good few reasons why I like to use MIDI bass. The first reason is I don't own a bass. Secondly, I have tons of songs always on the go, and sometimes I'll have a song that I haven't finished from like 2 years ago that I still really like. I'm not going to throw it away, and I come back to it and maybe there's a technical riff I can't quite remember how to play it. Instead of just trying to figure it out I can read the bass MIDI as if it's a tab. Another great reason to use MIDI bass is if you are recording and demoing with a guitar on your lap, you don't have to keep switching guitar for a bass. You don't have to adjust your input levels or anything like that, which you might have to do with different output pickups. It's very convenient when you're writing and demoing to use MIDI bass. So I'm going to move the drums down here. I always like the drums at the bottom, then bass, guitars on the top. That is pretty much it. That is going to be a great sounding pre-mix template, and I can show you some other templates of sessions I've already got in the works. Some additional things you could do is just duplicate some of these guitar tracks and maybe not have them go into the guitar group, and you could have like a guitar lead or an overdub. Obviously these guitars, I forgot to pan them, so I'm going to pan them now, and that's it. Now, additional things you could do in terms of actually having any kind of mixing or processing would be some master bus processing. So typically I'll have a compressor, and then I really recommend using Flatline 2, and this is going to be doing some clipping, but you can actually have the hybrid clipping and limiting, and essentially that is going to sound amazing. Let me show you some examples of different songs with different sounds, but using a very similar template to this. So I've got a song loaded up here that was a demo for Ultimate Heavy Drums. Originally it was quad track guitars, but I've deleted 2 of them just so I can show you exactly the sort of thing that I typically work with. There is no mixing of any kind on anything. So it's my plugin, we're just 100% to the right this time, so it's mix, EQ, cab to top right. This is the conclusion of an age, replication, impulse response. Bass, no processing. You can ignore that EQ, that is not on. And it's down. All we're really going to be doing is just balancing out the levels of stuff. Then at the bottom, Ultimate Heavy Drums, no processing. It's just down a bit. So we're just balancing out the volume levels, and that's it. This is how this one sounds. Okay, so let's listen to some of these sounds in solo. Guitars, bass, and drums. So the only processing I've really got going on here is on the master bus. So I've got a compressor, slow attack, fast release, high passing a bit, tape saturation just a little bit, flatline, which is clipping, and limiting. So the master bus stuff, you don't need it on. If you are going to have it on, just do some subtle stuff. Don't absolutely slam your mix. And this kind of thing is not the sort of stuff that I really get sidetracked or distracted by when I'm trying to write. So this is another example of a really basic writing template, just 2 guitars, MIDI bass. In this instance we've got gym bass loaded up with the distorted tone, middle tone drums, no processing, this time they're at 0, and the guitars using a mix ready impulse response, which is cab 1, top right, 57, and it sounds like this. And here's another final example of another writing template. This one is for After Lifeless Years. Something I'm just going to point out, never start your song from bar 1. Always just leave some space. So here's how this one sounds. I think this is essentially like the modern metalcore or mid-2000s metalcore kit preset. Sounds like, you know, like Alive or Just Breathing. So guitars on this one, obviously it's the Conclusion of an Age tone. That's the amp settings, pretty similar to what we used in the studio. Conclusion of an Age, mix ready, impulse response. Nothing on the guitar bus, just doing the volume. I've got a lead here. And on that, I do have some processing. I'm just taking out some low end. And I use CLA vocals a lot. I use it on guitars because I like the stereo widener it has for leads. It kind of adds like a chorusy sound. For bass, I'm using, I think, nocturnal bass. On the clean sound for this one, it sounds like this. And these are the drums on their own. So having a writing template like this one where everything is pre-mixed, you're not going to be reaching for EQs, compressors, is a great way to keep your creativity on track and to stop you getting distracted by plugins. The aim is to stop being a plugin curator and go back to being a songwriter. If you want to know more about how to achieve these sounds, check out this video next.